Let's talk a little bit about where and when to use relative positioning and how relative and absolute positioning can work together. This is the page that we're going to start with. It's a really simple page. It just has an H1 tag and then it has a paragraph tag. And I've already assigned a style for the font family and the color. So this is what my page looks like right now. I did put an image tag and it is nested inside my H1 tag. So you can see how the image just kind of floats up and to the left of the actual text that makes up the H1 tag. We're going to go ahead and we're going to create some styles that are going to allow us to kind of further control where that image is and see how it relates to the H1 tag when we start to add some positioning attributes. The first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and make a style for my H1 tag. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set the a border on the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and use a border bottom width. And we'll go ahead and just set this to 1 pixel. Then I'm going to go ahead and set the border bottom style. And let's use a style of dashed. And then I'm going to go ahead and add the border bottom color. And I'm going to just set this to be a gray color. So if I save my page and we refresh the page, you'll see that it looks like this. A dotted line goes underneath the entire H1, including the image tag. What I want to do is I want to kind of have the little image pop out a little bit and kind of float a little bit lower. So I want it to obscure the dotted line and kind of line up a little bit more with my header right here. So we're going to be able to modify some of the positioning attributes to achieve that. So what I'm going to start off doing is I'm going to go ahead and set the position. So I'll go ahead and set the position, and we're going to go ahead and use a relative positioning on our H1 tag. And let's go ahead and let's set the font size while we're at it, just to give this a little more control. And I'm going to use 1 3/4 M's for my font size. I'm going to save my page, and now when we reload in the browser, you can see that this is shrunken down, and really nothing else has really changed. I just set the position of the H1 to relative, but since I didn't put any specific attributes in there, it didn't actually move the tag down at all. Remember, when a tag is positioned relative, and you don't put any attributes in here, it's basically being positioned relative to the browser window. So that's how it's working right now. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a style for my H1 image. So notice how I'm putting H1 and then image. That's because I only want to affect images that may be located inside the H1 tag. So if I have images in other places on my page, I don't want to affect their positioning. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set the position property to absolute. And I'm going to go ahead and set both the left and the top. And I need to put in my semicolon there. Left and top to 0. So I don't want them to basically be anywhere. So if I save and I refresh, you can see how basically now my image is being absolutely positioned. The image is absolutely positioned to the H1 tag. So it's in our image. You can see how it now obscures part of the text. We're going to move the text over so we can have this function a little bit better. All we need to do is add a little bit of padding to our H1 tag. So coming back in here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add padding to my H1, and I'll just add a padding of, let's try maybe 65 pixels. My image is about 55 pixels wide, so that should do the trick right there. Let's save the page, and I'm going to reload, and you can see that that has pushed the text down and away. Not exactly what I wanted it to do there. You know what, I don't want padding all the way around. I should have just made a padding left. So let's change that to padding left, and let's reload. Now you can see it's just pushing this over a little bit, and now I have a really nice effect where my image kind of pops out and in front of the underlining, and it also is aligning nicely with my head tag. Now, the convenient thing about doing this, right now it looks like all of this is locked to the top of the browser. But if I go into my HTML code, my XHTML code, and if I just take this paragraph block and I copy it, and let's say I put it above my H1 block, I'm going to save my page and we'll refresh the page. You can see that now the image is going to float around with the H1 tag. So wherever the H1 tag gets positioned, my image is going to go ahead and float with that because it is positioned absolutely to the relative positioned H1 tag. And this is a really good example of how you can use absolute and relative positioning together. It basically allows you to have a lot of control specifically on where something gets positioned. And basically, if you think about it this way, if the item that you want to position, the image, gets an absolute position, while the element that we want to position the element relative to, which is the headline, it gets a setting of relative. You can think of relative value as meaning relative to me. When you apply relative positioning to a tag, it basically means all positioned elements inside of me should be positioned relative to my location. The last thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a little bit of a margin bottom. So let's just set the margin bottom, and I'll use a setting of 1em just to push the header away from the bottom paragraph a little bit, because it does seem a little tight right there. So when I reload, that gives me a little bit of extra space. But this is definitely a good use of nesting the absolute and relative positioning tags.